Yo, it's Brother here with my Blood Decay guide for World of Warcraft Classic Cataclysm. You guys have been asking me for one of these, so here's my best attempt at it. To be honest, I'm not the best Blood Decay in the world. I've played it a few times in Wrath. I really don't like it, but it feels very good in Cataclysm the handful of times I've played it on the beta. This guide will be written from the perspective of a feral prot paladin prot warrior player, so keep that in mind with any of my recommendations or opinions. On top of that, everything in here should be taken with a grain of salt. Everything said in here is my opinion, and if new data, sims, or info come out that contradict anything said in this guide, then feel free to let me know. I'll correct it. Again, one more time to reiterate, nothing in here is fact, and you should use your own brain and judgment regarding this spec. You're not a robot, use your own opinions, come up with them. Providing credibility for this guide by showing my logs from Wrath, TBC, on my Feral, Prot Paladin, Prot Warrior. I'm not bragging or saying I'm good. I just feel like I have something to offer in this space. Let me pull these up. Here's my Paladin from ICC. Pretty high rankings across the board in every tier. Here's my Feral from, looks like TBC. Pretty high rankings here. And then my Feral from TOGC. Again, in ICC, I was rank 4. Rank 3 for Feral. My Prot Warrior from TBC, pretty high rankings in every tier when I tanked. And then my Prot Warrior in Wrath of the Lich King, high rankings for the tiers that I tanked. Don't look at here, this is embarrassing. This character got abandoned, don't look at me. But yeah, there's all of my tunes. I actually tank, like I've said, I play multiple ones, unlike some of the people that make content surrounding Cataclysm. So with that out of the way, we'll go over various topics you need to know about the Blood Death Knight. In order, we'll talk about talents, glyphs, stats, rotation, opener, single target, AoE, cooldowns, offensive, defensive, profession recommendations, enchants, gems, consumables, everything and everything. Anything and everything. There's a lot to go over, so buckle up. This is going to be raw. Maybe put this on another monitor because I'm going to be talking a lot. Just a forewarning before we talk about any of that. The Blood Decay is the strongest tank in the game in Phase 1, and probably the entirety of Cataclysm. It's got not only the largest amount of defensive cooldowns, but also the most useful and overpowered. It's got really strong damage in single target and AoE, and is the best self-sustaining toolkit in Wrath so far. Even with a limited toolkit in regards to like utility, compared to the Prot Paladin or Feral, even Prot Warrior, that doesn't diminish how ridiculously overpowered this spec is. Before we learn about all the topics in the video, we must first understand what makes Blood Decay stand so tall above the other tanks. The Blood Decay's strongest tool is our Mastery. Our Mastery Blood Shield occurs when we press Death Strike. It reads, each time you heal yourself with Death Strike and Blood Presence, you gain X% of the amount healed as a damage absorption shield. Each point of Mastery increases the shield by an additional 6.25%. To understand how much we're healing, we need to take a look at Death Strike. Looking at Death Strike, it reads, a powerful strike that heals you for 20% of the damage you take during the last 5 seconds, or a minimum of 7% of your max HP, while also doing lots of damage. These two abilities are two core pieces that make this class insane. So to proc our Mastery, all we have to do is hit Death Strike, and it'll choose either the damage we sustained in the last 5 seconds, or 7% of our max HP. This makes Stam and Mastery incredibly strong defensive stats, and we'll go over that more in detail later. For now, we have more things to go over before we dive into the meat and potatoes. So one more thing we look at is runic empowerment. This is the other precursor we must go over. It's a new passive ability to the core Death Knight kit that smooths over our gameplay and can have a big impact when we need it most. So when we land a Frost Strike, a Death Coil, or a Rune Strike, we have a 45% chance to refresh a randomly depleted rune. This is really important as it lets us refresh Bone Shield, use D&D, Rune Tap, Death Strike, any ability requiring runes. With these two pieces of information, we can start going over the sections covered in this guide. Up first is going to be talents and glyphs. I'd recommend BDKs and Kata for Phase 1. Again, all this is subject to change. If new info comes out, I'll be happy to update it. So this is our single target talent build for the Blood Decay. It's got pretty much everything we need defensively, and it's got all of our debuffs and buffs that we bring. So we take 3 out of 3 Blade Barrier for free DR. We're going to get some attack power and bladed armor for every armor value we have. Really strong. We get improved blood tap to blood tap more. We get Scent of Blood. This is going to help smooth over our rotation via runic power generation. Up next is Scarlet Fever. This is our 10% physical damage reduction debuff. I'll harp on that later. Moving into Bone Shield, very strong defensive. I'll talk more in detail about that later. This is hard required. We get more toughness. We're also getting more AP from this, from bladed armor. We get Abomination's Might. This is going to increase attack power for everyone in the raid, and also give us a nice little strength bonus for bringing it. We get Sanguine Fortitude, which is going to, increase the DR from Icebound Fortitude. Very strong, and also makes it free, so hard required. Blood Parasite, we get a little bit extra damage, a little bit extra healing. Take that. Improved Blood Presence is going to increase our runic regeneration rate by 20%, and this lets us be crit immune. In Cata, a lot of things get changed for tanks, one of them being the crit immunity. We no longer need to be crit capped via defense or resilience. So just by being in our tanking presence, we get not only 20% rune regeneration, but crit immunity. This is very nice. We want to get to Will of the Necropolis, so we take Rune Tap, nice little free heal every so often, and then Will of the Necropolis is one of the most broken cooldowns in the DK's toolkit. I'll talk about that more later. We also pick up the other broken cooldown in the Vampiric Blood talent. If you're noticing trend here, BDK has very strong cooldowns. So this is nice, it's our last stand ability, gives us a healing amp as well. Very good. We go down and pick up Improved Death Strike to increase the damage done by a ludicrous amount, and also increase our crit chance, by a large amount, and increasing the amount we get healed by it. We also get Crimson Scourge. This is going to give us free Blood Boil procs every so often. It's going to help smooth over our rotation. And then we're picking up Dancing Rune Weapon. It's a very strong offensive cooldown. It's pretty much our only offensive cooldown, while also giving us some mitigation. We take a trip into the Frost Tree to increase our runic power max limit. It's going to help with the rotation, as we like to play around high runic power, which I'll talk about later. We get Epidemic, which increases the duration of our diseases. Again, another rotation helper. Looking at glyphs for the single target build, the Death Strike glyph is hard required. This is very insane. It is really, really good. So what it does, it increases our Death Strike damage for 2% for every 5 runic power we have, up to a maximum of 40% damage increase. This is really, really good. Because of this talent, we're going to want to be playing around 100 runic power. That's our maximum. We want to play super high runic power to buff our Death Strikes, so it's really important we do this. We're not playing like Wrath Frost DK, like I have been in my VODs here, where I've been dumping all my runic power with rune strikes. It's really bad. You want to have a lot of runic power, and having runic power mastery and anything that helps with that resource management is going to help a lot. Next, we get Glyph of Heartstrike, free damage. Also get free damage on single target in the form of Rune Strike. Looking at Dancing Rune Weapon, major glyphs. This is locked in, just free threat gen when this is up. Pretty nice. Be careful because you can rip off your off tank with this, because it's a lot. Bone Shield is locked in. This gives us movement speed when this is up, so we like this. This helps with positioning and uptime. And then the third spot kind of depends on the fight. If there's going to be some adds, we can take Pestilence or Blood Boil, but I'd recommend taking Anti-Magic Shell, especially for new DKs, because we get extra DR by increasing its duration. Minor glyphs, they don't really matter. Pick whatever you want. I'm playing Blood Tap, Resilient Grip, and Path of Frost. That is our single target spec for Blood DK. Moving into the AoE spec. You notice we don't have any points in Frost. We've taken that 2 points out, and we've also taken 3 points out of Blood. We don't really need a lot of runic power because we're not rune striking on AoE because it only hits one target. So we take 2 points out of that and a point out of Blade Barrier. We get more disease damage and we get Morbidity, which is going to increase our Death Coil damage and our D&D. This The death coil portion doesn't really matter. It's nice that we get higher death coil damage to like hit something that's far away if we're separated by a mechanic. But the main part of this is the D&D damage. To complement that D&D damage, we're going to be picking up Death and Decay. It's going to increase our duration of the ability by 50%. This is very, very strong in dungeons and on fights like Halphus, where there's a lot of AoE damage. If you're going to be the main tank, I'd recommend dual specking this with the other build. It's very nice playing both of these. You can play the single target one on bosses, you can play this on AoE. It's going to make your overall damage very high if you have time to swap specs. We still keep Glyph of Death Strike, of course, and then we still keep Glyph of Heart Strike, because it's going to help our AoE. Major glyphs, we still take Bone Shield and Dancing Rune Weapon. You can kind of play what you want here. Pestilence has some use cases in certain fights, like Valiona and Thuralion. You can jump in Pestilence to spread diseases, to hit both of them in the beginning. Blood Boil is probably better in most use cases though, so keep that in mind. And then the same minor glyphs, doesn't really matter. You can play what you want here. So moving in the stats, everyone really wants to know about it. You know, what stats do I play, brother? Do I want crit? Do I want hit? Do I want strength? I want to do big damage. Well, here we go. Here's the stats. I made this list in the middle of the night, much like this guide, after digging for 11 hours, because I've been really unlucky. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. Again, everything in here is my opinion. Don't take it as law. But here's what I think are our best defensive and offensive stats. The left side is going to be defensive, and then the right side is going to be offensive stats. So just like a general disclaimer before I start talking about this, I think it's really bad if you play full offensive stats, like gymming full strength, you know, insane crit, insane expertise, you know, just being really egregious with it. I think it's awful. The place of the Blood Decay is to be, you know, the main tank, sacrificing a limited HP pool in this phase of the game and previous gear to do a few hundred extra DPS is extremely unethical and dangerous to your raid team and their progression. I haven't simmed it yet, but it's probably a negligible amount of damage anyways. It's probably not a couple of hundred DPS. You can find out in the sim I link below if you really want to. Again, it's extremely dishonest and disrespectful of your raid's time to try to parse for like rank 1 kills on a tank that's historically a support role. Yeah, tanks start doing damage in Kata and beyond and well, but sacrificing our limited mastery, stam, and avoidance is not the way you should play. I've been there, nothing feels worse after dying like in a monkey DPS suit with 0 stam and wasting your team's limited time and efforts. So keep that in mind. I would not play full DPS. Also, you probably aren't going to get a rank 1 doing it. And you're going to die, probably, and you're going to look dumb. So, don't be doing this. Play defensive. So we can get into stats now. Generally, the best thing you can do is get the highest eye level pieces we can get with the highest stamina strength. There's some exceptions to this, which I'll cover in the pre-best section of this video. But our best secondary stat we're looking for is mastery, as we can increase our blood shield by 6.25% for every whole mastery point we have. We want it to be baseline because we get more of the stat that way. Reforging 2 mastery from another stat will always be a net loss. Choose pieces with high mastery. An example of this is like Earth-shaped pauldrons, shot from Draga and Grim Patrol Heroic. Our next best stats are going to be parry and dodge. We want to try to keep these as high as possible since they start to give diminishing returns, equal as possible, because they give diminishing returns the further we push one over the other. Some of the gear leans more towards parry, some more towards dodge. It's not the end of the world if one has higher than the other. Just try to keep them equal the best you can. As Blood Decay, we have limited avoidance outside of our Dancing Rune weapon, so having any avoidance secondaries on our pre-best sets will be great. In full best, I can see us reforging or even using pieces without avoidance, pieces with more hit and expertise. After that, haste is technically a defensive stat for PDKs because it affects our rune regeneration rate. The more runes we regenerate, the easier it is to mitigate damage via our mastery, as well as heal ourselves with Death Strike. Also gives a nice damage bonus as well, because more runes equal more damage, and more abilities and more CPM. So keep that in mind. In Prebus, going after pieces with high mitigation stats like parry, dodge, mastery means our attack won't hit as much, and sometimes our death strike will miss or parry. It's not the end of the world when that happens. You can go over more pieces with hit if you want to make sure that doesn't happen. Also, your outbreak missing is going to suck too because our debuffs aren't going to be up. I'm personally going to be going after more avoidance because I'm still new and I don't really know the damage profiles of all the bosses back and forth like I did for previous expacs. We'll go over the offensive side now because it's been staring at us this whole entire time. I'm just putting them here to give you the full picture. Again, don't play full strength metagem, strength enchants. Don't be that guy. If you want some hidden expertise, we can talk about that. So crit, just putting this out there, crit's going to give us the most damage on the sim. It makes sense. We crit more, we do more damage. I'd recommend not gymming crit. If an item has crit and hit, and you're decently geared, feel free to use that. Crit kind of isn't super important in my opinion because we're going to get 30% baseline crit from improved death strike talent. So, I don't know, we already have a lot of crit on one of our hardest hitting abilities. So, you know, moving on to hit, getting 8% hit will always be a DPS gain. And like mentioned before, it'll make our death strikes miss less and give us more uptime on our diseases that will debuff our targets. I've seen some content creators recommend playing at 8% hit even in Prebus, so the aforementioned scenarios happen less. It's totally valid. You can do that if you want. I personally am going to be playing more mitigation. Getting to like 6.5% expertise is a good idea. You can go further if you want, but in Prebus we don't really have a lot of stats to play around with. You're probably going to be sitting super low on hit and expertise anyway. Any expertise up to like, I think it's 14%, which is going to be like 56 expertise rating, is the cap. I wouldn't really go for that high. I like to sit around 9 to 11% on my tanks, just for face tanking purposes. I think swapping that extra 3% expertise to another offensive stat is going to be better. Anyway, after that is going to be haste. Like I said before, it's got some defensive capabilities, and it'll make your rotation easier. It'll make it smoother. If a piece of gear has that, it's not the end of the world. So that's our stats. I forgot to go over it, but stam also gives us a massive amount of threat in the form of vengeance introduced in Cataclysm. So there are some misconceptions about it, and the tooltips can be misleading. The tooltip reads, each time you take damage, you gain 5% of the damage taken as attack power, up to a maximum of 5% of your HP. This isn't really how it works. The Blizzard devs provided more information on Vengeance in a blue post on its real values. Their official statement reads, Vengeance caps on a number equal to stamina, all your stamina, plus 10% of base health, which is always going to be lower than 10% of health. The reasoning for this was to make sure tanks didn't scale too hard with damage with the old Vengeance calculation. Also, making a detailed new tooltip would have confused new players and only really affects like a small population of players. Anyways, stam now doubles as a threat stat, so it's really important we try to accrue a decent amount of this on our gear. Also, dropping stam to pick up strength is a super minor DPS gain, and I wouldn't recommend it at all. You'll end up on the floor, and you'll die to more mechanics, and it'll give your healers less time to heal you. So with these stats taken care of, we can look at the rotation, as well as openers for single target and AoE. There's a few core things we need to remember when pressing our buttons on our blood decays for single target. One, we want to keep up one of each rune on CD. So there's a new rune system in Kata, and it now works sequentially. What that means is 2 runes of the same type only recharge one at a time. The base recharge rate of runes is 10 seconds, and this is affected by haste and improved blood presence. If we use 2 runes, say unholy runes, the second unholy rune will start the 10-second recharge time, and the first one is fully recharged. That's why you'll see some runes at 7 seconds and some runes at 17. It'll take some time getting used to, but it feels okay when you get the hang of it. Just try to keep one of every rune on CD and you'll be good. 2 is keep your diseases up. Pretty self-explanatory. We do this by outbreaking. Much like diseases in Wrath, they are affected by attack power. This affects our opener, which we'll discuss later. 3, we want to play high runic power for reasons mentioned before when we were covering the glyph of Death Strike. So the more runic power we have, up to the cap of 100, the more damage our Death Strikes do. After this, we want to spend our Frost and Unholy Runes on Death Strikes. We want to turn these into Death Runes. It's very nice. There's not really much else to spend Frost and Unholy Runes on anyway, so we want to be pressing that. After that, we want to spend Blood Runes on Heart Strikes or Blood Taps. It's our spenders, self-explanatory. After that, we want to use Rune Strikes before Runic Power generating abilities. We don't really want to overcap on our Runic Power, but we also don't want to be super low. So avoid using 3 of these back to back, or even 2 of these sometimes, because it'll be harder to build up Runic Power back from. Try to use Heart Strikes and Blood Boil procs to build that RP up to our maximum of 100. Number 7, Blood Boil with Crimson Scourge procs for Runic Power. Like mentioned before, this is a filler on single target to generate Runic Power. Even just use it when you need it. And after that, if you have nothing to press, you can Horn for Runic Power. You can also press Horn and D&D during intermissions and downtime to generate Runic Power. So keep that in mind. AoE prio is basically the same. We want to keep 1 of each rune on CD. Self-explanatory. We want a D&D, and this is really, really good damage. And the AoE spec I linked earlier, we want to be using this ability on cooldown. It's like probably the highest priority global you can press in an AoE situation. AoE prios here, we want a Dancing Rune Weapon and then Outbreak after. This is so when we spread diseases, we can have 4+, because whenever we Dancing Rune Weapon and Outbreak, our little Rune Weapon guy also applies his diseases. And if we spread that, we get 4 targets, 4 diseases on each target. So it's very, very good. After that, we want to be Blood Boiling on 5+ mobs. And then smaller packs like 3 to 4, we want to be Heart Striking. And again, we want to be Death Striking as needed to heal ourselves, and also to turn these Frost and Unholy Runes into Death Runes so we can Blood Boil and Heart Strike more. Also keep up your debuffs, I'll go over that later. The opener for single target, we want to be in Blood Presence, and we also want to have Bone Shield on. I didn't write this earlier. We want to have Bone Shield on, and we want to use it early because it's got a 1-minute cooldown and like a 5-minute duration. We want to use this early so we have the opportunity to use it 30-ish seconds into the fight, which is normally by the time it falls off. If we're not using Army as a defensive, we can use it 8 seconds before the pull. This is also going to generate Runic Power because it consumes runes. We want to be horning around 1 to 2 seconds before the pull to get some more Runic Power. We want to pot as close to 1 as possible, or 0.0 on the pull timer as possible, so we get maximum uptime on our pot. After that, we're going to be taunting for Fixate, so nobody dies on the run-in. If you're Goblin here, you can like Rocket Boot jump in, or you can Rocket Jump in, whatever it's called. I don't play it. And then this is basically our opener. So we're going to be Death Striking, Heart Striking, into another Death Strike, into another Rune Strike. And then if you really need more RP after that, you can Blood Tap, Heart Strike here. Once we have sufficient Runic Power, we'll be using our Racial with our Dancing Rune Weapon, with our gloves, and anything else like trinkets. We want to make sure we're at high Vengeance too, because this affects our Outbreak and our Pestilence if there's multiple targets. So we pop our big Dancing Rune Weapon macro, then we Outbreak, and then if you have Death Runes up to Death Strike, you can press that there. Sometimes that happens at this point in the rotation. After that, you can Empowered Rune Weapon to reset all of your runes, and then probably Death Strike again because it's been a long time, and then you can follow the prio list of just keeping your runes on cooldown, 1 set each, playing high Runic Power. For our AoE opener, pretty similar. We want a Death and Decay such that the mobs walk into it. Shout out to Subtle for that tip. After that, we want to Death Strike, and after that, we can Heart Strike and Blood Bowl to build up some runic power. If you don't have a lot, then again, you can Blood Tap, Blood Boil, or Blood Tap Heart Strike here to build up some runic power. After that, we do the same macro at high vengeance stacks, and then we're outbreaking, and then spreading diseases, so we have 4 sets of diseases on every target. After that, Death Strike if you need, and then if you don't need it, then you just spend your Death Runes on Blood Boils on large packs and Heart Strikes on smaller. That's basically it. You'll notice I don't have Raised Dead in here. In my opinion, it's pretty weak. You can use it pre-pull if you want, or you can save it to sack your ghoul if you need it later. The sim puts like Raised Dead, or whatever the ability is called, like in the middle of our Dancing Rune Weapon window, which makes no sense to me. Because I think pressing buttons that allow your Dancing Rune Weapon to mirror you have much more value over like a high snapshotted ghoul. That's just my thoughts. You know, I'm not a DK main. Maybe there's some conflicting info I could take a look at, but that's my thoughts on Raised Dead. So that covers our single target in AoE. We'll take a look at our cooldowns now, both offensively and defensively. Offensive cooldowns. First is Dancing Rune Weapon. It's going to mirror the DK's attacks for 12 seconds. It has really big burst potential, and it gives us 20% parry as well. It's got a 1.5 minute cooldown with a 60-second runic power cost. This is our major offensive cooldown. We want to line this up with procs, use it with racials, pots, gloves, lust, anything and everything. We want to amp this baby up. Our next cooldown, our next cooldown is Empowered Rune Weapon. It's going to instantly refresh all of our runes and give us 25 runic power. It's on a 5-minute cooldown. We use this in the opener for higher burst with our rune weapon. It has defensive uses too, so keep that in mind. We can use this to, you know, get some death strikes if we really need it, or we can use it to army for DR if we really need it as well. Moving on, Outbreak is going to instantly apply our Decay Diseases. It's going to snapshot our RP, much like in Wrath, whenever we press Pestilence. So making sure we have a lot of procs here is going to be very helpful. Next up, you'll notice I have Troll Racial and not any other racial. In my opinion, and the Sim's opinion, Troll is going to be our best race because this is going to affect our haste and allow us to use more abilities in the opener. It's going to be more threat, it's going to be more damage, and we also have the ability now in Kata for Berserking to reset on every boss. So one of the major reasons people went Orc in Wrath was to press Blood Fury more than Racial. You get more uses of it, but that's not really the case now. So we want to be using this with Dancing Rune Weapon. This also affects our rune regeneration, like I mentioned earlier. So it's very strong for Blood Death Knight and Death Knights in general. I kind of think that Troll is going to be good for Frost and Blood, but I know Orc is insanely strong for Unholy. So, yeah. Whatever you do, just play an Orc or a Troll. It'll probably end up fine. I wouldn't recommend playing Goblin. I think the jump is overrated and unnecessary for Kata. If you absolutely have to play it, then cool, I guess. I really don't recommend it. And I really don't recommend you playing Tauren or any Alliance race. If you have to play an Alliance race, probably like Dwarf or Stone form, or like maybe Human. I don't really know. I'm not an Alliance player anymore. And then Gloves, that's our engineering cooldown. You will be engineering, and I won't hear anything about it. On use strength for 10 seconds on a 1-minute cooldown is very good. Line this up with other procs. That's going to be our offensive cooldowns. Let's take a look in defensive. There are a lot, so let's get started. Icebound Fortitude is our major wall. It's going to give us 50% DR for 12 seconds and make us immune to stun effects. Thanks to Sanguine Fortitude and her talents, we now have a total of 50% DR, which is really, really strong for a 3-minute ability. You can pop it before a stun effect goes out, or during a stun effect to remove the effect. So try to look out for use cases for that. Our last stand type ability is going to be Impure Blood, excuse me. It's going to give us 15% HP and then 25% healing amp for 10 seconds. A very, very strong cooldown. I don't know why Blizzard gave this to us on a 1-minute cool CD, but it's very, very strong. We're going to have a lot of time on this. The healing amp is nice. I would never recommend glyphing this, though, the major glyph. It's going to get rid of the last stand part of this. And when you think about it, if you use last stand, if you use Vamp Blood to give yourself more HP to survive a hit you wouldn't have otherwise survived, it's basically DR, so getting rid of that is really bad. The only time you really take this if like your healer is paying you to like have more healing amp, because it will increase that. But generally you don't really want to be playing with heal parsers. I'd recommend staying away from them. Up next is Bone Shield. It's a new addition to the Blood Decays toolkit. It's going to give us 20% DR and a little bit of damage as well. It's got 6 charges on a 5-minute duration on a 1-minute cooldown. It's also going to give you 15% movement speed since we have the glyph in. It's really, really good. You want to be pressing this as often as you can. You might think it doesn't look that long looking at the description. Last that long. But the changes on it have a minimum duration before they can be surrounded. The charges, have a minimum duration before they can be consumed by damaging attacks. I've heard conflicting arguments on this value. It's either 2.5 second minimum duration or 2 seconds flat. Either way, it's going to be up for a minimum of 12 to 15 seconds. So you should be trying to keep this up as long as possible. You want to be pressing it on cooldown, because if it's off cooldown and you don't have it up, you're going to lose damage as well. So very, very nice. Next up is Anti-Magic Shell, one of the strongest cooldowns in WoW's history. It's going to absorb 75% of the damage done to the DK, up to a maximum of 50% of the DK's max HP. And it's going to prevent applications of harmful magical effects 2 for 5 seconds. With the glyph, we get a longer duration, allowing us to absorb more magic damage. This ability's insane. You can prevent certain magic mechanics going on you, like on Maloriak. If you're main tanking the boss, my main tank told me he was able to negate the healing debuff placed on him and allow his healers to heal him more. So always try to find places where you can cheese into Magic Shell. It is very good. Next up is World Necropolis. It's basically our cheat deathlock ability. It's going to give us 25% DR for 12 seconds when brought below 30% HP. It also refreshes Rune Tap, gives a free charge of it. And it has a very, very small 45-second ICD. That is insane for what that's giving us. You shouldn't plan around using it. It's more like something you have in your back pocket. But having this proc basically means you're safe, and you shouldn't need to use like a massive cooldown, like a wall or a dancing rune weapon to live anything. If anything, you bone shield with this when you get low, or you can vamp blood, so you get topped quick. Also, once you're topped, you have free DR, so it's really, really comfy. It's a really nice cooldown. It's really overpowered. Using, like, proccing this on pull and exit on Halphus or something is, like, really nice, and it can save pulls, so you should be tracking this. You should be tracking its ICD and its DR duration in your weak aura somewhere or on your UI. A very, very powerful cooldown. Like I said earlier, Army is also a defensive cooldown. It gives us DR equal to our parry and our dodge chance added together for 4 seconds. It's got a 10-minute cooldown. You could like blood tap to get a death rune and then use this, to rip it. Or you could ERW to refresh your runes to use this as well. And the Death Pact is the worst cooldown we have, but it's something. I wouldn't really use this unless if you cannot hit a mob to Death Strike to heal yourself. Downstairs on Thralian and Valiona is really good in that case. So professions, I'm going to rant about this. I don't care who you are, who your mother is, who your dad is, what he does for work, your tax bracket, your dog's name, your cousin's uncle. I don't care. You're applying engineering. It's the best profession in the game. If the gloves wasn't enough from earlier, having a really nice, like, guaranteed pre-bis helmet with customizable secondary stats and rocket boosts are insane, especially on a mobile class like the Death Knight. So keep that in mind. These do backfire a bit, so they aren't 100% success rate for the Nitro boost. So always keep that in mind. I forgot to go over this in my bear guide, but Alchemy Trinket is like there's one of the strongest trinkets in Phase 1. It's got really high stam, it's got really high mastery, which is our best defensive stat. So Alchemy, along with engineering, is probably what you should play if you care about your raid team's progression. I'm really lazy, and I'm going to be JC on a lot of mine, since I played that in Wrath. But if we are not alchemy, you should always be engineering, by the way. If we're not alchemy, then we can pick one of these professions. I'd recommend these over gathering. With blacksmithing, we're going to get 2 extra gem sockets, which is very, very good. We can put mastery in there, we can put hit, we can put expertise. It's very, very solid. I'd really recommend playing blacksmithing if you aren't alchemy. If you're still JC from Wrath, it's very nice. You can get big mastery gems, or big stam gems, or big strength gems when we have to DPS as Unholy. For enchanting, we get ring enchants, we get stam on there. It's nice. For leatherworking, we get extra stam, and for inscription, we also get extra stam to shoulders. Again, I'd really recommend not playing Gathering Professions if you care about your raid at all and its progressions. It's also 2024. You really don't need Gathering Professions to make gold. There's other ways to do so. If it's like your RP, or if it's like your fun doing that, you can play that. You just want to have extra stats that'll help your raid's earlier progression. So that is Professions. Play Engineering and Alchemy. Moving on to Enchants and Gems. Basically same thing with the professions. We're going for super high stam and mastery enchants. So, like I mentioned earlier when I was going over stats, you are always playing really high stam. Really, really high stam and mastery in defensive stats. I don't care who you are, you're doing that. Unless if you're going for a rank 1 kill, which 99.9999999 repeating percent of you aren't, you're playing stam, you're going to help your raid out. You're going to be a beefcake. Everyone's going to love you. We go for the helm enchant, stam here, shoulder enchant, stam here. Our cape enchant's going to be 250 armor. I've been told you can tinker and enchant an item, and it won't override each other. If that's the case, we run the parachute cloak tinker, so that we don't die on the Blackwing Descent elevator. Onto the chest, we get 75 stam, and bracers, we get 75 stam as well. If you're inscription here, you know, you can go shoulder, big shoulder stam enchant, and if you're leatherworking, you can go big bracer enchant. Our hand tinker is going to be the engineering, main stat on use. We're going to use that in tandem with the 65 mastery enchant to make our blood shields bigger. Very, very strong. You cannot enchant your belt, but you can put a nitro boost tinker on there and a blacksmithing socket. This blacksmithing socket is going to be BOE, it's a belt buckle. Anyone can use this, don't be a bum, show up with this so you can have an extra gem socket. It's really important. Leg enchant, we're using, you know, stam of course. I think if you're leatherworking, you can use the really big stam enchant here. And then our boot enchant is going to be the lava walkers, I believe it's called. You get mastery and move speed. Is going to help when your bone shield falls off. You at least have some movement speed, and it's nice to see this enchant return after its departure in Wrath of the Lich King. So, pretty nice. If you're enchanting, you can enchant your rings. You go stam here, of course. And then your weapon, you're always playing Stone Skin Gargoyle. Gives you stam and some other stat. Someone will correct me. But you always play Stone Skin Gargoyle. Onto gems, same thing with enchants. We're going after heavy stam and heavy mastery. Our meta gem is going to be the stam armor value meta gem. There's some use cases for the spell damage reduction for heavy magic fights. Maybe Nefarian if you're having trouble living the breaths and the crackle. Our red gem is going to be parry and stam, the defenders. You can also use parry mastery if you want to make your blood shields bigger. It's up to you, whatever you want. Those are called define gems. Our blues, I'll be running mastery and stam, called puissance. If you really want an extra HP pull, then the solid big blue gems are very nice. Our yellows, we are running puissant as well. So that is our enchants and gems. I'd recommend playing higher mastery. If you think you need a bigger HP pull as well, you can do that. But mastery is our best defensive stat. Stam will give us some extra vengeance and extra AP there, so keep that in mind. I think it's important to have at least a good chunk of HP so that you can live mechanics and survive like unlucky melee attack strings that you don't avoid, and you don't have your mastery up for it. So it's nice to play that there. For consumables, I forgot to do this on my bear vid. I have it in the comments of it, but we are running the mastery food. It's very important. Mastery is our best stat. We want to stack as much as possible of it. After that, we go the strength pot. And then for our flask, we're using 450 stam. So utility, we don't really have a lot compared to the other tanks. The shield tanks probably have the most utility in the form of Rallying Cry, I believe it's called, and the DSAC that Prop Paladin brings. What we do provide, though, is the best application of the physical attack and attack speed reduction debuffs in the game. We're going to have the most uptime on them. It's going to cost the least, globals to put up. And these are pretty much always up, especially if you're running 3 out of 3 Epidemic, I believe. It's very, very important that you also track the duration of these debuffs, not only for yourself, but for your other off-tank. If you're playing with a prot paladin or a bear, it's really, really helpful that you try to keep these up as much as possible. Moving into army, there's probably some use cases for this in later tiers. It can taunt non-boss ads, take hits for you. You can use this in the last phase of Nef, and Blackwing Descent. There's probably, you can use this later in tiers if you want. Be creative with this. Death Grip is also considered a utility spell. You just grab a mob, move it over, 35-second cooldown. You can use the interrupt abilities on casters and dungeons, and you can also interrupt mind controls on Cho'Gall with it. So make sure your unholy DKs are not being bums and pressing this button. A-Bomb's Might and Horde of the Winter, I just threw these in here to pad, I guess. These are our raid buffs and party buffs. If somebody dies, make sure you horn to rebuff them so they're not screaming in comms that they need raid buffs. That covers pretty much everything. We can go into a Priebus set. Looking at this, you'll notice I have engineering, and I've got a few BOEs. I have some alternatives to those as well. If you're poor, if you don't have gold coming into Wrath, or if you're a new player, we have the engineering goggles. These are very strong. You can put the engineering gem equivalent socket things in here. I'm running mastery and hit here. Again, we have high stam here. It's got 20 strength bonus too, which is okay, I guess. If you don't have engineering, you could run, I'd recommend Helm of the Proud. It's going to give you dodge and parry. You can also run Helm of Easeful Death. These are both Justice Points helmets. If you don't want to spend Justice Points, you can not get the PvP helm. Just any, strength thing on there will be nice. For neck, we're running Lustrous Eye. It's going to give us mastery and dodge. Again, like I said earlier, we want to be picking pieces with baseline mastery so that we don't have to reforge it off. If you don't get this, you can get the Blackrock Caverns neck with mastery and parry, but this one's going to cost you justice points. For shoulders, we have some flexibility. I'm rocking the Earth-Shape Pauldrons. They're going to give you some avoidance in the form of parry. or excuse me, dodge, and these drop from Grim Patrol. If you don't want to use the dodge ones, you can use the hit ones. They drop from Blackrock Caverns Heroic as well. A lot of things drop out of Blackrock Caverns, so you'll be running that a lot. If you want some hit, you can run this. I've seen some people recommend running hit for reasons I've mentioned before. That is perfectly fine. Again, we're using the Therazane Exalted here. We're also going to be picking up the Guardians of Hyjal Exalted cape. This is a very, 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 very good cape. It's going to give us mastery and dodge. We're putting armor on there. If you, for some reason, don't have Guardians of Hyjal like rep, one, you're a bum, but you can get a BOE leatherworking thing, I guess. The other options are pretty bad. There's mastery parry in here too. You should do your reps. You go grind your reps, man. There's nothing else to do for the first week. Even if this is your second or third tune, you have plenty of time to grind out the reps. If you show up to raid, and if you don't have reps done on your characters, you're bald. We're picking up the blacksmithing BOE right here. It's going to give us parry and expertise. I'm reforging some of this parry off into mastery because we have a lot of it, and I want to try to keep these equal so parry doesn't DR faster than dodge. If you don't have a lot of money, we can go down here and get Beauty's Plate from Blackrock Caverns, or you can spend Justice points on the Chestplate of the Steadfast. It's going to give you Mastery and Dodge. This will give you Mastery and Parry. So, lots of avoidance options on the chest. We're running Big Stam here as well. Bracers, this might be controversial. I think these are better. Excuse me, I'm playing with no clippers. I should stop. This might get controversial, but I think these are better than the Tolvir rep ones, the Sandguard bracers. Sure, Sandguard bracers have, more stam. They give us more avoidance and give us some expertise, but they don't give us mastery, which is our best stat. It's insane. And the Alpha bracers also have a socket and a 10 mastery socket bonus. Like, these are insane. They are so good. And they also have more strength. I'm going to run the Alpha Bracers. If you're unlucky, and if you have rep, you can get these. If you're not unlucky, or if you're unlucky and if you don't have rep, you can pick something on this list as well. These are insane. I highly recommend these. And for weapon, this is a depressing topic for most, especially me. I am 600 something solves in for trolls and like 1400 solves total. I still don't have my Zenrock, but it is probably going to be your phase bis. Unless if you're like a GDB tycoon and you have multiple blood decays to put in splits or whatever and buy your 372 weapons, you're probably going to be running Zenrock for a very long time. I didn't reforge this, but you can reforge the crit to mastery or reforge the crit to probably just mastery. It's really, really good. But Zenrock's going to be your best. If you don't get Zenrock, which I might not, we're going after the Stone Core Sword of the Bottomless Pit. It's going to give us mastery and haste. It's also got a slower speed, which is going to help a lot with our attacks. Our next best is going to be Wildhammer Heroic if you're unlucky on the Sword of the Bottomless Pit. It's going to give us mastery and haste as well. It's a little faster though. Our hands, I'm recommending going the mastery parry fingers, and I reforge these to get some expertise because I have very low expertise in this set. That's going to feel awful, but you got to do what you got to do. I'm not sure. Also, these drop from Halls of Origination. Some people recommend handguards, or the numbing handguards, excuse me. You could definitely do that if you want. I like the red socket bonus on the Fingers of Light because we get more mastery that way. Taking a peek at the BOE ones, where are they? Fist of Fury. Sure, you get a lot of stam and a lot of strength and a lot of armor, but you lose mastery and you get crit. And it's got a 10 strength red socket bonus. If you really want to run this, you probably can. I don't know. I don't recommend it. I think it's weird. I don't think you should play this. Also, another BOE option is the Edward. Yeah, here we go. Pauldrons of Edward the Odd. High mastery, high avoidance, very good. It's probably going to be super expensive though. It's a world drop. I really wouldn't recommend this unless if you're going for like realm first or NA first or world first. So keep that in mind. Definitely go for the dungeon drops here. Our belt, we're going for the... I have 50 mastery on here. I should have 65. Holy. We're running mastery here and we're running stam here. Forgot to mention. On the belt, we're picking up the blacksmithing BOE belt. And we're putting nitro boosts and another socket on here. And we're throwing some gems in. If you are not going to have some gold, you can go after the SFK or Tolvir belts. Both are fine. You're going to lose a lot of stats though. The belt's probably going to be easily attainable as well. These give you dodge and hit, expertise and dodge, pretty nice. You're going to lose out on a bunch of mastery though, so keep that in mind. You definitely want the belt. I highly recommend the belt. I'm personally going to be running the Triton ones, Triton leg guards from Throne of Tides, I believe. Yep. From Nethbalon's Cache. They're going to give you high parry and high expertise. I'm reforging some of this parry, like I said earlier, because I have a lot of it. Reforging it into mastery. The boots, pretty much locked in. Dragon Ball Exalted. It's got mastery and parry. I reforged some of the parry into some hit because I needed it. Again, you should grind out your reputations. Don't be that guy that shows up with no reputations and in like full greens. So don't be that guy. Rings pretty much locked in. We're going after the high mastery with hit chance stats, hit and expertise. The red rock band comes from the Tolvir rep guys. So go after this. And then the Umbrus band, which gives mastery and hit, drops from Grimbatol. If you're unlucky with Grimbatol, you can go down there and get a guaranteed ring from Therazane. It's going to give you mastery and dodge. Very nice. If you, for some reason, don't have both reps, then you can go look down this list and be shameful. Trinkets is where some diversity starts to rear its head in this guide. If you're playing Alchemy like I told you, and getting rid of the figuring of the Earthen Guardian for the Life-bound Alchemist. This has a socket too? Holy. This is so good. Yeah, you should definitely play this trinket. You get 213 mastery and a ton of HP. I have 20% mastery right now. My shields are going to be ginormous. I've seen and heard some conflicting info on whether or not we're going to have access to the Hellscream's Reach Exalted by the first raid lockout. If we do, you're picking up this instantly. We get high mastery from it, and we also get the Cindy Shield effect from the Cindy trinket. This is a very good trinket, high mastery and high resistance. And resistance in Kata just gives you pretty much flat DR the more you have of it. This is very, very good on Nefarian, on his breaths, and on his crackle, if that's what the raid damaging ability is. If you're on a Nixie in the corner, you just pop that. If you are not Alchemy, and if this trinket is not out yet, the Mirror of Broken Images from Hellscream's Reach Exalted, you can get Leaden Despair. And if you're jewel crafting, you're going after the figuring of the Earthen Guardian. Both of these are fine. They're high stam, so you're going to have higher vengeance. Your blood shields are just going to be a lot lower, a whole % lower, in fact. And yeah, this got like a weird, cheat death armor proc for 10 seconds, but like that's really bad. You're really just using this for the stam. And this is going to give you some on-use dodge, which is like okay, I guess. Not insane. If you're not jewel crafting, we can take the figurine off. And I think we go for probably the Sandy trinket, man. This thing is insane. I was using this on beta for Nefarian. And like I said, for the mirror trinket, this is the same trinket, just lower eye level. It's very, very good. And it's got a 1 minute cooldown too. There's a lot of uses for this. Between this trinket, mirror, and AMS, you have something for every magic damage effect on that fight. It's insane. if you don't have this, and if you don't get led in despair, we're taking the trip of shame all the way down here, and we're picking up the crab. Where are we? You can also run magnetite mirror as well. It's going to give you some expertise, bridge the gap. You can use this on fights where you aren't really taking a lot of damage. But yeah, if we don't get led in despair, we're getting the crab from Throne of the Tides. And that's pretty much all of our tank trinkets. It was really annoying on the beta because there wasn't a lot of these trinkets, so I didn't get to play around with a lot of them. But yeah, Porcelain Crab, it's going to give you dodge, and it's going to give you an on-proc mastery, which is fine. It's got 20-second duration too. But this is the pre-best set that I've came up with. But yeah, if you have made it this far, then thank you very, very much for watching. I think that covers everything. Like I mentioned before, I'm not a perfect player by any means, and I'm a non-Blood DK main. I'm just playing it for prog and wanted to basically write this for myself and a few other people that were asking me in my comments. If you want me to make guides for other tanks or DPS, then let me know. This took a lot of time and effort to make, so if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps someone out like me with like no presence on YouTube. I've just started making videos because people wanted me to for Kata. There's a DK joke in there about presences. If you want to make it, you can if you want. But thank you for watching. If you watch me yap about a class I just started playing for however long this recording is, this is going to be a very long video. I'd really recommend putting it like in the car or on a second monitor while you dig for archaeology. If you want to ask me questions or leave comments, the best place to do that is down below. I'm pretty active in responding, so just let me know. If you like this and want to watch me play live, I'm live like every single day at twitch.tv/brotherllol. It'll be in the description. I'll be live like every day for Kata launch, leveling a ton of tunes and a lot of tanks, and tanking a lot, and probably getting mad and screaming at people. So I'm live every day on non-content launches near 8 p.m. So I'll be raiding a lot, doing a lot of G-bids, and I'll be playing with Bipolar and tanking for them. So if you want to watch those raids, you can watch me there. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to Kata. Thank you so much for watching, bros. Never thought I'd be making guides on YouTube, but here we are, man. I'll post the resources in the comments for things, and I'll link creators that I deem good. So GG's, man. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one if I make one. I don't know.